Hi, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So this week we will continue to discuss prepositional phrases. So last time we introduced prepositional phrases. Typically, they can be used as either adjectives or adverbs, or we call that adjectival or adverbial. Today we will look at some more kind of special cases. We say that it's a golden rule that a prepositional phrase can be either considered as an adjective or adverb. However, even golden rule has some exceptions. So it's important to understand such exceptions, although they are really rare, but when you encounter them, you will not get lost. Okay, so prepositional phrases. They're so important because they are used so extensively in our writing. Also, sometimes we kind of overdo it. If you have too many prepositional phrases in a sentence, typically that's a signal of poor writing. Okay, so let's just review what we discussed last time. So almost every, that's the key point. Almost every prepositional phrase, once identified, acts as either an adjective, adjectival, or an adverb, adverbial. And the noun or pronoun is known as the object of the preposition in a prepositional phrase. That's required. So we say that when diagramming a sentence, you typically want to first identify subject and the verb, or the main subject, the main verb. And you can typically remove all the prepositional phrases because they are modifiers. So if you remove them, you will help to quickly identify the subject and the verb, the main verb. Okay, so last time we said that how to diagram prepositional phrases. And there was a kind of cases where whether certain prepositional phrases are modifying just like it's adjective or adverb, it's unclear. It really depends on the context. Okay, so we gave a interesting example, and exactly the same sentence or same clause, depending on the context of in the writing, they could mean different things. Okay, that's what we discussed last time. So, for example, in this case, the graffiti on the wall here, in the first example, here on the wall actually as a prepositional phrase modifies the verb. Okay. Sorry. In this case, modify the noun is an adjective, and in the second case, the boys decide to draw the graffiti on the wall. Here, the prepositional phrase on the wall modifies the verb draw. Okay, so it really depends on the context. But there are some even more kind of exceptional cases. So that's what we are going to discuss. On rare occasions, meaning that this is really an exception to the rule, a prepositional phrase may also function as a noun. This is truly rare. In general, a prepositional phrase is either an adjective or an adverb. Okay, and we know adjectives modifies a noun, and the adverb can modify a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. But if a prepositional phrase logically functions as a noun, how should it be used? Well, we have some examples. Look at this sentence. The best time for a short phone call is before lunch. Remember, this is a subject plus be verb sentence pattern, right? So we know there are 3 patterns where you have a subject and a be verb. That's type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1 is generally followed by an adjective. And that's subjective complement, adjectival. It's technically called predicate adjective. The king is healthy. The girl is beautiful. Or it could be type 2. The lady is a pretty woman. Well, that doesn't mean too much but women is a noun. So as a complement, it's a noun complement. But we have type 3. Type 3, it's either a time or location related to adverb, but it's mandatory. So we call that obligatory adverbial. The king is here. The party is tomorrow. So in those cases, actually, tomorrow there's one more layer of complexity, but that's called adjectival, objective adverbial. But we don't have to worry about that. The point is that there's a type 3 pattern where you have a be verb, then that's followed by an adverb. It's not an adjective or noun, but that adverb is mandatory. We call it obligatory, meaning that you have to have that. Otherwise, the sentence is not complete. The idea is complete. But here, we see that the best time for a short phone call is before lunch. Typically, we want to say the best time for a short phone call is something like now, or it's tomorrow. That would finish the sentence. And in that case, it's followed by a complement. But here we have a prepositional phrase. The best time is before lunch. And that is really kind of just, is before lunch an adjective or adverb? The answer is neither. It cannot be logically like an adjective, because when we say it's an adjective, it relates back to the subject, and it's an inherent property. Just logically, like the king is healthy, the king is happy. Those adjectives are inherently property or kind of characteristic of the subject. On the other hand, if it's a noun, it's just another name for the subject. But here, before lunch, how can we explain before lunch? We know before lunch is a prepositional phrase. But here, before lunch is neither an inherent characteristic of time or just another name for time. So what is before lunch in this case? Well, before lunch is a noun. Okay, it's functionally as a noun here. So this is an exception to our so-called golden rule. When you have a prepositional phrase, it's either an adjective or adverb. That's generally true for most of cases. But here, before lunch, is logically just a noun saying the time. So before lunch is just kind of another name for the best time. But it's a prepositional phrase. We'll see a better, clear example. Here we have a few variations. Okay, it's all about the same sentence, but we have 4 different ways of saying that. In front of the class is a stressful place to be. Okay, in front of the class is a prepositional phrase. We know that. But here, it's the subject of the sentence. Okay, in front of the class is a stressful place to be. So, because it's the subject, it must be a noun equivalent. No questions about that. It cannot be anything else because it's a subject. In front of the class is a stressful place to be. Or we can say this, reverse the order, say this same idea, same sentence in an alternative way. The most stressful place for me is in front of the class. Logically, this is similar to our very first example. The best time for a short phone call is before lunch. The most stressful place for me is in front of the class. So clearly, in front of the class is a subjective complement. Okay? It just tells something about the place. In fact, it's just another name for the most stressful place, right? So logically, this is another name for the most stressful place. Therefore, logically, this prepositional phrase in front of the class is a noun equivalent. And in this case, it's a subjective complement. But what really happens here is that this is kind of just a elliptical structure. What the sentence should really be is that we talk about a place, and that place is modified by this prepositional phrase in front of the class. So if we want to say this really just completely and more formal, it should be the spot in front of the class is a stressful place to be. That's what we should say this sentence in a very formal way. The spot in front of the class is a stressful place to be. However, it has been widely accepted in English that we can say this sentence just dropping the true noun subject, the spot. We just say it in front of the class. So, when we say in front of the class is a stressful place to be, we actually mean the spot in front of the class is a stressful place to be. Grammatically, we call this understood words, meaning that some words we understand what it should be, but just without saying that. So, similarly for the previous version where we have subjective complement, we want to really say the most stressful place for me is the spot in front of the class. Okay, just like in the we just swapped the subject and the object. So in the previous version, the spot in front of the class, or just in front of the class, is subject, but now here is the subjective complement. The most stressful place for me is the spot in front of class. If we say it that way, the real complement is the spot, and in front of the class, it's a truly adjective or adjectival modifying the spot. But here, it has been widely accepted that we say this sentence in a kind of understood word way. We just say the most stressful place for me is in front of the class. As the result, in front of the class, without the understood words that it actually modifies, itself becomes a non-equivalent. So that's why we say on rare occasions a prepositional phrase may also function as a noun. Because in the formal way, it's still an adjectival modifying a noun, but that noun is dropped. And we understand it's there, but we just say the prepositional phrase itself. Okay, so this is a very rare case, but grammatically established in English. So, like we said, English grammar is not like computer language, program language grammar, which is always well defined before you can even use it. English grammar is an after fact because, there's no language God prescribe how we should say our language. Language evolves all by itself, depending on how people use it. So that's something happened first, and the grammar is more like a after fact, just phenomenon. And we try to make sense of the grammar to help us use the language better. Okay? So sometimes we have to make sense of certain language usage and put them into the framework of grammar. In that way, this establishes grammatical usage is an after fact. Okay, so let's understand that. It's completely different from a computer programming language's grammar, like Python, C++. Those grammars were well defined, okay? But English grammar is not. So there are always kind of exceptions to the rules. Okay, now we talk about diagramming modifiers. Remember, the very reason we discussed prepositional phrases is because we first discussed some more common or general modifiers. They are adjectives and adverbs. Again, an adjective only logically modifies a noun, while an adverb can modify a verb or an adjective or another adverb. So understanding such relationships, it's very important for us to write grammatically correct sentences. And you can see why we emphasize those four types of parts of speech are important, namely verbs, nouns, adjectives, and adverbs, because they deliver substantive information. And because adjectives and adverbs are the main modifiers, we see that they can be extended into more general, just a modifier like a prepositional phrase. And later we will learn adjective clauses and adverb clause. They're also modifiers, but they're clauses. So right now we are using phrases, prepositional phrases, to act as adjective or adverbs. And they are all called modifiers. So if we do sentence diagrams for sentences, how should we diagram those modifiers? Well, all modifiers, including adjectives, adverbs, or prepositional phrases, serving as adjective or adverbs, a diagram beneath the words, they modify, okay, through a diagonal line. And we have already seen them. Now we just want to more formally discuss how to diagram those things, okay? So the important thing, remember, is that because they are modifiers, they modify certain words. So it's just natural to diagram those modifiers right below the words they actually modify, which is no-brainer, right? Okay. Adverb is a little bit different from adjective because we say that adjectives usually its position is very predictable, and most of the time an adjective is just right in front of the noun that it modifies. Also, occasionally there are some exceptions to that general pattern. An adjective can be after the noun that it modifies. An adverb, on the other hand, can be quite flexible, and this is most just obvious when an adverb modifies the verb, the main verb. In that case, it can be right in front of it, can be right after it, or in a remote position, at the beginning of the sentence or at the end of sentence. It doesn't have to be adjacent to the verb. So in that case, how should we diagram such adverbs? Well, since in those cases the adverb actually modifies the main verb, so even though it can be moved around without apparently just adjacent to the verb, we still diagram it right beneath the main verb. And that's the important just way to tell that the adverb actually modifies the verb. Because if the adverb modifies the adjective or another adverb, there's no such just problem because usually they are just right next to each other. And we certainly know just we should put the modifier, the adverb, right below the word that actually is being modified. So now, the test is that if you can move the adverb within the sentence without really or significantly substantively changing the meaning of the sentence, then you know that the adverb is actually modifying the main verb. And you should diagram the adverb accordingly. What about prepositional phrases? Well, because in general, a prepositional phrase is either adjective or adverb, we don't have much trouble to diagram that, except that we need to know how to diagram a prepositional phrase properly. Okay? And when the prepositional phrase is subjective complement, we have certain technical problems. Remember, in the sentence diagram, we have the main line, and all important essential information is above the main line. The subject, the verb, and the subjective complement. For typical modifiers, they are beneath the main line. Okay? And we will see shortly, if a prepositional phrase serves as an adjective equivalent and as a subjective complement, then it will be above the main line. And that creates a technical difficulty because it's no longer beneath the main line, so it cannot write below the word that it actually modifies. So we'll see how that works. Okay? But in general, except that kind of special cases, a prepositional phrase should be beneath the word that it modifies. That means that it will be below the main line. And in that case, we will use a special structure you have already seen, but we will just discuss that. It will be on a diagonal line, which has a diagonal line connect with the horizontal line segments, where the preposition is on the diagonal line and its object is on that horizontal line segment. Okay? This is all in the abstract, but you have already seen some examples, and today we'll go through them. So you shouldn't feel completely lost at this time. And one more thing is that we have already seen this. You sometimes can have multiple prepositional phrase. Sometimes even in the rare case you have 3, but typically you have 2 that are chained together, back to back, or you should say. So there's no special treatment that. If that happens, usually a second prepositional phrase modifies the object in the first prepositional phrase, and then you just diagram them accordingly. This can happen, just understand that. Okay, let's take a look at some of the examples. Okay, so that child is being unreasonable. What are the modifiers here? Well, that, right? This is a pointing pronoun, okay? But it's actually an adjective. This is called demonstrative adjective. But it's also a pronoun in some cases. That means that it just that is unreasonable. We generally say, we don't mean person, but if you say that's unreasonable, that is a pronoun. But here, that is an adjective. It's called demonstrative adjective because it modifies the child. So therefore, the diagram is, without it, we just remove all the adjectives or modifiers. The bare minimum structure is child is being unreasonable. But now, with this modifier that, it should be right beneath child. That child is being unreasonable. Okay? Next example. The stapler is on the desk. Okay. What is the modifiers here? We have the, but we also have this prepositional phrase on the desk, right? What is the kind of part of speech equivalent of this on the desk? Is it adjective or adverb, which are the typical cases? Or as we discussed earlier today, in rare occasions, it can be a noun. So it can be quickly excluded that on the desk cannot be a noun because it's unlike the examples we saw earlier. On the desk, not like the time is before lunch. It's not another name for the stapler, right? It has nothing to do on the desk. Logically cannot be a renaming stapler. Cannot be that. So on the desk is either adjectival or adverbial, but which one makes better sense? Is on the desk an inherent property or characteristic of stapler? No, it's not something inherent about stapler. It's just more describing the location of the stapler, right? And we know when we have a location here, it's actually an adverb, adverbial, and this is a mandatory. We call obligatory adverbial. Okay, so to diagram this, stapler is on the desk. So here we see that we have three things. The first there modifies the stapler, and the second there modifies desk. And on the desk as a whole, which is a prepositional phrase, modifies the be verb. And this is pattern number 3, because on the desk is about the location. So, and this is neither adjectival subjective complement or a noun version subjective complement. In other words, this is neither type 1 or type 2, and this is type 3. Okay? Okay. The music is extremely loud. What kind of modifiers we have here? Well, we have there, we have extremely. There is an adjective or adjective equivalent. It's an article, right? The definite article. So the definite article apparently logically just like an adjective modifying music, but how about extremely? Extremely modifies loud, adds a degree to loud. How loud is loud? What kind of loud is? Extremely loud. Therefore, this is the adverb modifying an adjective, so it should be diagrammed accordingly. So there modifies music and extremely modifies loud. The music is extremely loud. Oops. Okay. My cat is a lover of tuna. All cats love fish, right? Fish is delicious for cats. So my cat, my apparently modifies cat. It's a possessive adjective. Is lover. That's the bare bone. So a modifies lover, no doubt. That's an article. And the point here is of tuna. Of tuna is a prepositional phrase. And clearly, it's right after lover, so it modifies lover. And as the result, it's logically adjectival because it modifies a noun. It cannot be an adverb. An adverb cannot modify a noun. So it's right here. A lover of what? A lover of tuna. So it's very important to understand this kind of structure, a noun of another. Typically, the noun after of is the object of, but of something together is the prepositional phrase, and that serves as an adjective modifies the noun before it. And this is so common, say, a bottle of milk. We say this phrase kind of without even thinking how we should make sense of every word. So a bottle of milk, what is the head word? Meaning the core part of this phrase. A bottle of milk. Are we talking about a bottle of milk? We're talking about a bottle. And of milk, it's a modifier, tells something about the bottle. A bottle about what? Of what? A bottle of milk. Also, you may think that, well, we are really talking about milk here, but grammatically, the subject is bottle. If we make a sentence using this as subject, a bottle of milk is in that refrigerator. So, bottle is in refrigerator, not milk in refrigerator. Also, well, you can think that, yeah, we really mean the milk is in the refrigerator, but a bottle of milk is in the refrigerator. Structurally, the bottle rather than milk is the subject. and off milk is merely modifying bottle. Okay, so here a larva of tuna. Okay, this is something we have several asterisks here. This sentence is kind of special. The graduation party is today. Is this logically or grammatically legit? Well, we say this all the time, but that doesn't mean that it's almost always correct. Well, because it has been used so just commonly, even logically this sentence actually is ungrammatical, because today is not another name for party, right? Party is party. So today cannot be noun renaming the party. Today is about time. Party is about a thing. They cannot be equivalent to each other. So today is not a noun renaming the party. So what is today? Today here is technically it's a noun used as an adverb. We call that objective adverbial. And the explanation here is that this sentence should be said as the graduation party is on today. But we never say that. We can say it's on Tuesday, on Wednesday, but we never say it's on today, right? But logically it should be on today, and today is a noun. When we expressing on a certain day with a time, we usually say on that day, on Tuesday. But it has been so used that even Wednesday, we sometimes can drop on, we just say it's Wednesday. So what happened here is that today, it should be really a noun, but regardless, some dictionary may even just say today or tomorrow, they are adverbs. Or they have an entry meaning adverb. But if you think about it carefully, today is just a specific day, so logically it should be just a noun. But even then, it's used here as an adverb, and that adverb is the obligatory adverbial, and this is the pattern number 3. Okay? Party is today. Today is an adverb. So, even so, it's actually just modifying adverb, but it's really not something to describe the be verb. But how do we diagram it? We still need to diagram today on the is. Cannot diagram today on the party, because it's not an adjective modifying the party. So the party, the graduation party is today. So what about graduation? Graduation, why does it has asterisk? We discussed this before. This is also an exception, but very common one. In English, it's quite often we can use a noun to modify another noun. But logically, that noun is an adjective. So this is called just the change of parts of speech. And this is one of the most common cases where you use a noun to modify another noun. So the modifying noun is an adjective. The modified noun, of course, is being modified. So this has another asterisk. The graduation party. Graduation is a noun modifying party. Okay? But we understand this is a kind of change of the part of speech. But still a modifier, it's just a noun acting as an adjective. Okay. Well, we have a more complicated sentence. Her favorite picture from the vacation in Florida is a snapshot of a playful dolphin. Well, it's a complicated sentence, but if we remove all the modifiers, which kind of just most of them, actually all of them are in red here, now we can easily see the backbone of this sentence. It's just picture is snapshot. Picture is snapshot, which logically makes sense. Everything else is a modifier, and we see that we even have some chained prepositional phrase modifiers. So how do we diagram this sentence? Well, put the main thing above the main line. That's the bare minimum. So picture is snapshot. Now we add all the modifiers. So her favorite, apparently both are adjectival modifiers modifying picture. So her favorite picture. From the vacation in Florida, what is that? Apparently, from the vacation, that's a prepositional phrase, from something, right? And what does that from the vacation? That modifies picture, clearly. Picture from the vacation. Where does the picture come from? From the vacation. So picture from the vacation, that's apparently one adjectival from the picture, from the vacation. Okay, so this is the first level of prepositional phrase modifying picture. However, we still have something after vacation in Florida. So in Florida, apparently is another prepositional phrase, but what does it do? It modifies vacation. Where's the vacation? Vacation, yeah, we know where the picture came from. The picture came from the vacation, but where is the vacation? Vacation was in Florida. So this is the second level of prepositional phrase. So this is really a chain prepositional, prepositional phrase where within the first prepositional phrase we have another one modifying the object of the first prepositional phrase. So from the vacation in Florida, together with the super or gigantic prepositional phrase modifying picture. A snapshot, apparently there, of a playful dolphin. So this is another prepositional phrase modifying snapshot. What kind of snapshot? Snapshot of a dolphin. And what kind of dolphin? A playful dolphin. So snapshot of a dolphin, that's a prepositional phrase. A playful, that they just modify dolphin. And that's how we diagram this pretty long and seemingly complicated sentence. But if you follow certain kind of just guidances, this won't be too difficult because you can quickly strip off all those prepositional phrases and see picture is snapshot. It's the real thing you want to focus on. That is the bare minimum, and then put everything else beneath the main line. Okay? Picture is snapshot. Everything else is modifier. Okay. So, prepositional phrases in the first three patterns, meaning with the be verb, predicate adjective, predicate noun, or obligatory adverbial. Okay, those three patterns. But when we have a prepositional phrase, logically, it's either adverb or adjective to complete the sentence of the be verb, but relates to the subject. So we will see how that will be diagrammed and what example. So let's first review the pattern 3 example. The king is here. We already know here is an adverb, and it can only modify the be verb is, and this is mandatory, so we call that obligatory adverbial. So here is just that. We know how to diagram that. But what about this? The king is on the throne, on a special chair for the king, right? Essentially, the king is here, but where? It's under a chair. So this logically, it just almost exactly the same thing as the king is here. So therefore, on the throne should be a prepositional phrase functioning as the obligatory adverbial, just like here. So we will diagram that accordingly. But on the other hand, when we have another prepositional phrase which is logically more closer to an adjective, then it's a completely different story. So let's first review the typical way we say that. Subject, be verb, adjective. We know that's pattern 1, right? The king is happy. But what if we replace king with a prepositional phrase, which is logically the same thing, and the meaning, in terms of meaning, they are very close. The king is happy. The king is in a good mood. They kind of just meet the same meaning, right? Or very close. So in a good mood, it's really something inherently just the king's just mental state, right? The king's current status is in a good mood. So therefore, unlike on the throne, here in a good mood, it's really adjectival describing the king. Okay, and that should be very different from the previous on the throne example. So how do we diagram those two? So, okay, we'll see that in the later slides. But there's a very difficult point. When you have a prepositional phrase right after the be verb, sometimes it's unclear whether it's an obligatory adverbial, which would be type 3, or it could be actually a complement, a subjective complement, which can be either type 1 or type 2. So there are some situations where it's hard to tell logically whether it's an adverb or adjective or even a noun when you have a prepositional phrase after the be verb. It's not clear cut. The reason for this is that, again, English grammar is not predefined. It's an after fact. We try to use grammar to explain something that already been used. Okay, so in this case, it's totally unclear. Let's take a look at some examples. They were under suspicion. Very simple sentence, right? They're under suspicion. Well, what does that mean? It means that they were suspects. The two sentences essentially mean almost exactly the same thing, right? Except under suspicion is a prepositional phrase. So what is its logical equivalent in this sentence? They were under suspicion. So clearly, under suspicion relates back to they. It tells the fact that they were suspects. On the other hand, they were suspects. Suspects is just a noun, And in this case, it's a complement relates back to they. So if the two sentences mean almost the same thing, can we say under suspicion is a non-equivalent? But that doesn't make sense, right? Because they are people, and on the suspicion cannot be really say, how can you say on the suspicion, this is unlike before lunch, which is tells the time, the best time to make a phone call is before lunch. That means that before lunch is logically just a noun, meaning just another name for the time. But on the suspicion, how can on the suspicion be equivalent to people? That just doesn't make sense. Even logically, this sentence is the same thing as they were suspects. So that's truly a challenging one. Okay, now, we already see that. The king is happy. The king is in a good mood. So the queen, similarly, this is just a just modified version. The queen is in good health. In good health, it's about the queen, not about the way it is. So therefore, this is clearly equivalent to an adjective like healthy, right? The queen is healthy. The queen is in good health. So in this example, the prepositional phrase is very clear, it's adjectival. Okay? But the first one, under suspicion, it's more like a noun. Also, it's harder to equate that to a noun. Under suspicion, how can that be a noun? Okay, so that's why this is kind of tricky. It's unclear. On the other hand, there's one thing that we haven't discussed about. That is that when we use the real linking verbs, we have pattern number 6 and the number 7, remember? They are equivalent versions of pattern number 1 and number 2, where you say the king is happy. The king appears happy. That's the correspondence between type 1 and the type 6. She is pretty. She is a pretty woman. So she's a woman. But she appears, she seems pretty. She appears, he look pretty. He look a beautiful woman. So pattern number 7 and pattern number 2 are also clearly related. Meaning that in both pattern 6 and 7, we can use a genuine linking verb for those subjective complements rather than be verb. Be verb is technically also called a linking verb, but it's a special linking verb. It's not a true linking verb. So, but look at this sentence. The queen appears out of breath. Maybe the queen just ran a marathon. I'm just kidding. The queen can never run a marathon. The queen appeared out of breath. So this prepositional phrase can be right after a true linking verb. But remember, while we have type 1 and type 6 correspondence, type 2 and type 7 correspondence, we don't have any direct correspondence between type 3 with another, say, type 8. At least we haven't learned even what type A is. But there's no such a thing. That means that if you have an adverb here, we cannot say the queen appears here. We can only say the queen is here. In other words, for type 3, we cannot use a linking verb to replace the be verb. So the adverb after the be verb, that's why pattern number 3 is special. It's a very fixed usage. The queen is here. We cannot say the queen appears here. Similarly, this explanation seems of no relevance. This is a good sentence, very legit, right? This explanation seems of no relevance. Of relevance, or of no relevance, is clearly a prepositional phrase. And what does it do? It modifies explanation, right? So explanation is irrelevant. We can say this explanation seems irrelevant or is irrelevant. Both are good. But we cannot say the party seems tomorrow. That's just another example where you cannot use a true linking verb in pattern number 3. You have to use a genuine, just a be verb right there. The party is tomorrow. So what does this tell us? Well, out of breath or of no relevance can go right after a true linking verb. While pattern number 3, an adverb cannot be after a linking verb, can only be after a be verb. So that means that out of breath or of no relevance are not logically similar to here or tomorrow, which are obligatory adverbial. They're adverbs. So in that sense, out of breath cannot be adverb. It's really just adjectival, or kind of describing the queen, right? The queen is kind of exhausted, out of breath, is tired. Similarly, of no relevance, it's irrelevant. The explanation is irrelevant. So it's important to use this kind of comparison to understand how those components logically connect to other parts of the sentence. Okay, so in this case, the prepositional phrases kind of just very clear, they're adjectival. But in the first sentence, they were under suspicion. It's more like they were suspects. This is truly difficult. Okay, so how should we diagram those? Well, if you have a prepositional phrase that's truly a predicate adjective or subjective complement is adjective and subjective complement, then we just diagram just like replacing happy, right? The king is happy. The king is in a good mood. So when we diagram the second one, it should be, the structure of the diagram should be very similar to the first one. Remember how we diagrammed the first one? We put everything above the main line, but if a prepositional phrase, remember a prepositional phrase, you have a diagonal line and then connects to a horizontal line, and it's right beneath the word, it modifies. But in this case, it relates back to the points back to the king. It cannot be right beneath the king, right? So it's because in a good mood has to be above the main line as well, and taking a slot of happy. So how can we diagram that? We cannot point the diagonal backwards, diagonal and pointing to nothing, pointing to the air or the sky. So what shall we do? because just imagine if we truly put the prepositional phrase into the slot of happy, it looks weird. It cannot be connected to anything. It's just floating there. And to address this issue, in general, whenever we have something of the same nature above the main line, taking the place of either a subject or, in this case, subjective complement, we use a special device or special kind of just a diagram, a component. We use a pedestal, it's just like a stepping stone, to raise that prepositional phrase. Okay, so let's take a look at how we should diagram that. This is the common one. The king is happy. Happy is an adjective right there, points back to king. We know that. But what about the king is in a good mood? In the good mood, it's a prepositional phrase. Just imagine if we put that into happy slot, that sounds really a bad idea because it's just floating there. It cannot be attached to king. It cannot be attached to anything at all. So how do we do that? Well, we just artificially fix the issue because sentence diagram is a man-made tool. So that's how we diagram in a good mood. We raise it from the main line. We use this weird thing, we call it a pedestal, which is essentially a small triangle there, connect to the main line, and we raise a vertical bar which supports this in a good mood, in mood. Because in its preposition on the diagonal line, its object mood is on a horizontal line segment. Now with this pedestal, the vertical bar just support it. It just raise it. Okay? So we use this special pedestal to diagram this sentence. And we will see this again and again in many other cases where you have other non-equivalent, like an infinitive or something, a gerund, something of that nature. So it's important to understand what we are doing here, because without this, it doesn't make sense just to put it in a good mood into this slot. Therefore, because this is special in this slot, we just raise it with this just quote-unquote pedestal. Okay? So you need this pedestal only when the prepositional phrase is the predicate adjective, meaning that in this slot. It could be actually predicate noun as well, but the point is that if the prepositional phrase has to be diagrammed in this slot, we need a pedestal. Otherwise, it will be floating there. Okay? That's it. In other words, in more detailed explanation, when this prepositional phrase takes the place of what would normally be a single word adjective on the baseline of the diagram, that's right here, happy. Right? Happy is a single word adjective taking this spot, which is a complement, points back or relates back to kid. In this case, its equivalent prepositional phrase, in a good mood, should be supported by a pedestal. Okay, so prepositional phrase as subjective complement, it can, how do we diagram this one? They are suspects. Well, we know how to diagram that. That's just a noun, adjective. A predicate noun as subjective complement. We know how to diagram that. We already did. But now, how about this sentence? They're under suspicion. As we said, under suspicion relates back to they. It's a kind of describing their suspect, right? So, but is under suspicion a replacement of suspects? No. This is not logically a noun. They are something. They are suspects. This is describing their under suspicion. Under suspicion really relates back, modifies noun. Okay, so this is how we diagram the first version. The second version, it will be something like this. Okay, this is just similar to the previous example where you use a pedestal raise this under suspicion. So you can see here it's taking the subjective complement, but whether this is a non-equivalent or adjective equivalent, it should be an adjective equivalent. Okay, because it doesn't make sense to replace non with under suspicion. It can be better related back to they as an adjective. Those points are kind of special. Okay, so finally we have this adverb. Adverb is easy. So the king is here. We know how to diagram that. Here, right beneath is, but on the throne, in this case, it's kind of very similar to here. It tells us a location, and this should be an adverb. Therefore, we diagram it just almost exact the same. The king is on the throne. Okay, I know today we talk about a lot of highly technical things, but this is just more like learning math. Okay, if you feel overwhelmed, that's totally just predictable, because perhaps you never learn grammar in such a rigorous way. We emphasize the logical connection between those things. So very much like learning math, okay? But the importance is that once you get all those logic clear, then when you analyze your sentences, you will know what is kind of ungrammatical, because certain things do not fit into the diagram or the logical structure of the sentence. And this is really important for you to analyze a good or correct sentence in the first place. Without knowing all those things, it will be everything seems random, or this may be correct, that may be correct, but you are not confident about anything because you just don't know what the rules are. So I know today we talk about some highly technical and quite difficult grammar points probably you never learned from the school. But that's why we are here. So I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.